has probably been for me in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Questions like, well, who am I? They don't answer it. They don't say, well, you're this and this and this. But what they do is they have guided me to just, to what it is that who it is that I want to be. The first was understanding that you are not just a physicality. That's the first thing to grasp. You are not a physicality. And just like some of the speakers said yesterday, I believe it was Mr. Green who talked about, there is a soul and it's 22 grams. I think they've measured that in body weight. That is really who you are. And connecting to who that person really is, what that essence is all about, you begin to realize, oh my God, I am not at all who I thought I was. And I'm purposely being vague because I don't necessarily want to tell you who I am, other than to say that who I am here on earth in this lifetime and the mistakes that I have made, on some level I knew better not to make those mistakes. Okay? But we do. We experiment. We create. As far as the meaning of life, they would never tell me what that was exactly. All they would say, it just is, you are creating your own adventure. Okay? So again, the responsibility is on me. As far as mentoring, to want to talk and to speak, the idea was to just keep it very, very simple. To just share their perspectives and let the people do whatever they wanted with it. And it doesn't matter whether anyone believes it or not. People know truth. People know bullshit. Eventually it all comes to the surface. It has to. Because all of you are just like me. You all know better. You know what's real. It's just a question of detaching ourselves from our addiction to physicality. And that's what it is now. It's become an addiction because the focus is on the physicality. We're not objective anymore. As a soul, when you have an out-of-body experience and you detach from your physical form, you are completely objective. You have a 360-degree peripheral view. Okay? And that's because you're objective. You're not addicted. You're not stuck in the body or addicted to the body. And that's the part that they have been working on with me the most, is to actually feel and know that essence of myself as much as possible. So when we talk about mentoring, the mentoring is to get us from where we are here to self-empowerment. That's what I'm talking about. Once we have achieved self-empowerment, and it won't take long, folks. It really won't take long. We will know exactly what to do because we are spiritual beings. We are eternal. There is no age to us. And that's not a metaphysical blind. That is a reality. So the mentoring is to help us move out of our addiction to physicality into full power as spiritual beings. And it isn't full of dogma. It isn't any of that. It's all about introspection, voluntary introspection. That's what it is.
Thank you.
Hi, Mr. Collier. Thanks for being here today. I wanted to ask you something about something you mentioned in your interview before. You mentioned that an ancient race called the Patal created human beings probably so long ago. I wondered if you could just elaborate on that, because I always just wondered about it ever since you said it. Thanks.
It is believed that an ancient race, some of them call them the founders, other cultures call them the Patal, created not only the wormholes, but created most of the physicality in what we know as our universe. Because as they travel, they are finding civilizations and the ruins of civilizations far beyond anything that even they know. And we're talking 5th, 6th, 7th, 8th, 9th, 10th density space travelers who are traveling not only in moving in our physicality and other physicalities, but even their own. The wormholes is the best example that I've been given. No advanced space race has any idea how they were actually built, but we know that they exist. In fact, there are several that have snapped, connecting our galaxy to some of the other nearby galaxies. They've snapped, and no one knows how to fix them because we don't even know how they were built. So.
Hi, I'm Dan Bender, the one who's working on the streaming, and I was asked by the streaming audience, which is now up to 1,500 members currently watching, and I think we've probably had over 10,000 have tuned in on this particular segment, and I picked, thank you. I've kind of picked 3 quick questions, hopefully they're quick, that I was asked to pass on. They're randomly chosen, so they may not be the best ones we've got out there, but what the heck. One of the first ones was, what free energy devices do you know about?
One I know of is magnetic. It's essentially was invented by a gentleman in Tennessee that was just a bit larger than a shoebox. And it was generated by magnetics. And it had an engine inside of it, and it spun. Once you started it, it would power a home completely independent no matter where it was. And I understand that the gentleman and the technology vanished about 8 years ago. He tried to get a patent on it, and that's when he basically went off the grid.
Okay, next question.
Because he demonstrated that technology. I just wanted to finish. Okay. He actually demonstrated that technology.
Okay.
And that he had began building that technology back in 1976.
Second question I have is, can mentoring happen on the internet? Now, I have to admit, I wasn't completely paying attention to everything because I was so busy with everything on the internet, but
I don't
that's
know.
the question I have.
That's a great question. I don't know.
Okay.
I wouldn't see why not.
Okay, I guess we have to figure it out. My little side jobs I've got to do. Anyway, last question I have here so I can let some of the other folks get back in here. How do you deal with the greed issue?
I don't have an answer for that.
Okay.
I mean, what is greed? That they'll never have enough? It's basically grounded in fear, I would think. Fear of loss, fear of abstinence, fear of not having enough, fear of loss. To me, that's what greed is. It's just a fear. Can it become an addiction? Apparently it has. But I personally don't have an answer for that.
Well, thank you from the internet audience.
Okay, thank you.
I just had, you had mentioned about possible coming changes, like on a geological level. To me, it seems so chance. Like I'd appreciate maybe some thoughts on your thoughts on. Do we just trust our intuition as far as where to go, what to do, how to plan for something like that, or it seems a rather daunting thing to try to get your head around.
Well, you know, change occurs all the time, and you do things intuitively all the time as well, whether you realize it or not. You might change the way you go home one day and do something different, and then when you get home you find out that right where you would have been there was a horrific car crash. That in fact just happened to my wife. And she did something completely out of the ordinary for her. And she would have been right there. So, you know, everybody has their guides, everybody has their own intuition. I'm not always the most intuitive at times either. But it's just, it's the only way I know to answer this is you just learn to trust yourself. It could be that you'll be guided to go out of town when something happens. I don't have that answer. Or you will be right where you don't think you need to be, but you're going to be there for a very, very good reason. And out of it will come out a self-empowerment that you never would have had before. we all have our own paths, and we are all creating our own realities. And we all have our own personal agendas for learning and growing and becoming who we are. Your experience is going to be very different than mine. And I don't know how to tell you. I mean, hey, if I had a hard date, but I never do, and I don't get a hard date. And I've made that mistake in the past about giving hard dates, when in fact they were probabilities. So the fact is, I don't know either, but you just have to trust that you will be exactly where you need to be when you need to be there. And I know that, that's kind of a foo-foo, la-li-la answer, but I don't, that's my own experience as well, that I just have to pray and hope that, have faith that I'll be exactly where I need to be.
I appreciate that. That's pretty much how my take on it, and I just wanted to kind of see what your thoughts were on that, because to try to take it from a mental perspective and plan and get out maps and seems a little absurd to me, and that's kind of going the other direction in the trusting the flow of life. So I appreciate that answer.
Exactly, and personally, I wrestle with that all the time. I try to have backup plan to backup plan to backup plan to backup plan, and I spend all this energy doing this, and it goes completely a different direction. So.
How you doing? Thank you so for being here. I just had a question. When you mentioned the thing about the 47 levels of government, which are just triggering
Levels
something.
of security clearance.
Security, yeah, that the president doesn't even know, that he's not really in charge. This happened 46 years ago, of course, but I was just wondering, what are your thoughts on the purpose of President Kennedy's assassination? I just was curious about that, if you had, wondering.
No, don't be sorry. Don't be sorry. Ooh, man. Okay, I will tell you my perspective on that. Eisenhower told Kennedy about 54. So Kennedy knew, and he told Bobby, obviously. One of the things that happened, and this has been documented through the great work that Dr. Stephen Greer has done with the Disclosure Project, is that most of the extraterrestrial knowledge and technology and exchange of technology went black 3 weeks after Eisenhower knew about it. So he didn't even know where it was. And this has been confirmed by one of his chief of staff, a brigadier general. It's Langdon, I believe it is. Langdon. So he shared all this with John Kennedy. And apparently where they felt the hub of the loss of where this technology had gone and how far it went black was something called the Special Operations Coordinating Group, which is part of the National Security Council. And what's interesting to note is that the first thing John Kennedy did when he took office was sign a presidential directive abolishing the Special Operations Coordinating Group. Now, no one knows exactly who they are, but they're not only connected to the intelligence, but also to all the black programs, to the secret space program, and everything else. There is some conjecture that these people are the governors of the Federal Reserve, because they control the money, and it's really all about the money. That's conjecture, though. I don't know for a fact. But what's interesting to note is that they had connections everywhere to everything, because all the intelligence from above would come to them, and then they would decide which information the president was supposed to get. Again, those layers of security clearances. What's interesting to note is after the assassination, the very first thing Johnson did when he got back into the White House was recreate the Special Operations Coordinating Group, now known as Special Group, in the National Security Council. That's my take on it.
And that's awesome. But that time during the 60s, of course, there's like 4 more. Are they all like just kind of series of random events, or are they all different, like, King and Bobby and, are they just all random occurrences of lone nuts like, James Earl Ray and all those guys in Syrian, or are they just a part of that whole thing?
I think, but we do. We do. We experiment. We create. As far as the meaning of life, they would never tell me what that was exactly. All they would say, it just is, you know, you are creating your own adventure. Okay? So again, the responsibility is on me. As far as you are, and connecting to who that person really is, what that essence is all about, you begin to realize, oh my God, I am not at all who I thought I was. And I'm purposely being vague because I don't necessarily who it is that I want to be. The first was understanding that you are not just a physicality. That's the first thing to grasp. You are not a physicality. And just like some of the speakers said yesterday, I believe it was Mr. Green who talked about, you know, there is a soul and it's 22 grams. I think they've measured that in body weight. That is really who you want to tell you who I am, other than to say that who I am here on earth in this lifetime and the mistakes that I have made, on some level I knew better not to make those mistakes. Okay? Has probably been for me in the last 5, 6, 7 years. Questions like, well, who am I? They don't answer it. They don't say, well, you're this and this and this. But what they do is they have guided me to what it is that I